Namaskar. Welcome to this edition of the India Foundation podcast. This edition of the India Foundation podcast features the interview with Mr. Suresh Prabhu, former Union Minister, India's G20 and G7 Sherpa, and Member of Parliament from Rajya Sabha, with Ms. Gauri Dwivedi, journalist and columnist. Let's begin.
Hello and welcome to this very special conversation that we are having today with Mr. Suresh Prabhu, who's a former Union Minister, Member of Parliament from Rajya Sabha, and India Sherpa to G7 and G20. This is a conversation that I'll be holding for India Foundation. I'm Gauri Dwivedi, senior journalist and a columnist. And I hope Mr. Prabhu will touch upon both the economic and some of the other broader issues that India is facing right now. And more importantly, this conversation comes in at a time when the Modi government would be celebrating its second year in its second term. I know it's a somber moment and there won't be any celebrations, so to say. But Mr. Prabhu, I think it'll be a good time to do a lot of introspection for the government as well, that 2 years into its second term, almost halfway there, some of the big milestones or achievements in your assessment as far as first economically, do you think were sort of covered? You as a technocrat, what is your assessment in terms of how the government's report card, so to say, has been in the last 2 years?
Thank you very much, Gauri, for this opportunity. As you know, these last 2 years have been marked by some unprecedented challenges for any government in most parts of the world, if not all. Because more or less, as we began 2020, actually we had a corona. In fact, it started at the end of 2019 or 2020, and that's why it's called as COVID-19. It started with 19 actually. So in a way, coinciding with the beginning of this government, but not necessarily at that time, but a few months later. As a result of that, we have been seeing a huge slowing down of global economy. There has been a huge contraction, not just slowing down, it's a big contraction. The biggest economy, US, has contracted significantly. Japan has always been a slowing economy for the last few decades, but again, it contracted. China didn't contract much, but second largest also. European Union, the largest bloc after US, again had a very negative impact of that in 2020. The result of that, it will obviously impact the Indian economy, because as compared to 1991, when our total influence of global economy on India's economy was not as large as it is today. So in the last 30 years, Indian economy has more integrated with the global economy. Therefore, whether it is from the demand side, that's why obviously it affects your domestic as well as international trade, or whether even from supply side, there's a lot of disruptions in supplies because India is also part of a global supply chain. So in both ways, India in a way was affected. So you have to look at this, put that into perspective, that this was a very difficult period for any government in the world and particularly for India. Of course, last few weeks have been again even more challenging because the second wave is really has seriously impacted socio-economic life besides health, which is a very major challenge for any government to deal with. And when it happens, an unprecedented crisis of this magnitude, then obviously your resources get diverted to firefighting than building durable infrastructure. So you have seen that last few months have been devoted to fighting pandemic. Therefore, you have to, whether it is giving free food to the migrants, which is absolutely necessary, or which is providing support to small and medium enterprises. So all of these were, in a way, fiscal measures, and even to some extent, expansion of monetary policy to ensure that we actually create enough monetary resources available to the economy. All of that has, I would not call it would have happened in a normal course of time. So therefore, the last, if you want evaluating the 2 years performance of the government, it must be seen in that context and must be seen with that perspective, that is one of the most difficult, challenging period for any government in the world. Again, this particular period also was a period in which, because global economy was slowing down, and then again, we also had a little bit of hangover of the previous few quarters when economy had already was down before this government took over. I'm talking about the same government in a uh, new term. So therefore, I think this has to be balanced and looked at in a perspective. So I think it's a very difficult time, but I would credit the government with managing it with a lot of strength. I think this is not the best period for any government. This was a very difficult and challenging period for the government.
True. Given the fluidity of the situation right now, do you think that economic decisions can't be cast in stone? That because we said when the budget was to be presented, or because we said at the beginning of this year that we're going to now follow a certain process as far as our economic decisions are concerned, we'll continue with that. Do you think it's time to do course correction? Because you're right that it's such a fluid situation globally. The impact has been so severe of COVID that to prepare ourselves for the next challenge, or to be in time for the next anniversary of the government next year, what do you think could be the 2 or 3 top decisions or top issues that need to be dealt with economically for India to be far more resilient?
If you look at it, obviously, we have to accelerate the growth rate. That absolutely the fundamental objective of any new economic policy should be to accelerate the growth rate. Now, how do you accelerate the growth rate? That is very important. What will bring in more dynamism to Indian economy? So one is to make it grow faster. We have to make it more competitive. That is extremely important. If the economy is not competitive, it will never be able to succeed in global markets. And as I was saying earlier, that because of our integration into the global market, India's economy's global market is even far more than before, and we want to even increase the share of India's global trade, then obviously, if you're not competitive, you'll not be able to do that. And you cannot become competitive globally unless you're competitive back home. So making India competitive in all spheres of economic activity has to be a primary goal. And to do that, competitive means not necessarily only being in competition, but also making Indian industry less regulated, to do away with unproductive, unnecessary regulation. In fact, as Commerce and Industry Minister had set up a group under then, it used to be called a DIPP then, which is now called a DPIIT. Yes. Set up a group under the chairmanship of Secretary to remove almost all unnecessary and unwarranted regulation. We succeed in doing more, some we have to do more. So that is one part. The second part would be that, if you look at it, economic model of most of the fast-growing economies was succeeded in the last 4-5 decades. Each one of them could succeed because they could keep capturing share of global market more and more. They could expand their footprint globally even more. So that has to be another. So of course, that's what I was saying, competitive, but also to increase your footprint, you need strategy. I recall I'm just telling so that you ask me what's the roadmap. So the roadmap was prepared. As a Commerce and Industry Minister, I had set up a group under chairmanship of Sujit Bhalla, who is currently India's representative on the International Monetary Fund.
Yes.
So I set up a group under his chairmanship. And today's foreign minister, at that time working for the Tatas, Dr. Jaishankar was a member of this. Former Commerce Secretary Rajiv Kher, the present chairman of Quality Control of India and the former partner of McKinsey, the chairman of McKinsey actually. He was made a member. So like that, we had a lot of people working in that. I had prepared a roadmap. What is that we need to do to increase India's market share globally? And again, I'm talking about if you don't have bigger market share, your economic growth back home will be impacted adversely. It's all you've seen. So there's an example of all economies which have succeeded in the last few decades. They have done this very aggressively. So that's the second thing that we need to work on that. Thirdly, part of that is that if you look at each of these segments of India's economy, whether it is services, whether it is manufacturing, industry, services, or agriculture, each one of them will have to contribute. So unless all the 3 cylinders are put on fire, But at the same time, you'll not be able to do that. So in industry, competitiveness is one part. Also ensuring, and then again, that's also the extension of that competitiveness, as I said, in increasing your share globally. We had prepared a roadmap of $5 trillion economy to increase industry share, which is currently 16% of GDP, to 20%. So making it $1 trillion contribution from industry to the entire economy. And I had prepared a complete each and every, so you're asking about roadmap. For each segment, what will constitute $1 trillion? It is easy to say 20%, easy to say 1 trillion, but you must then now break it down. How much that will come from, say, for example, I'm just giving example from steel, for cement or something else. And to make sure that you get that, then again you have to break it down and finding out whether how steel or cement, what are the sectoral problems that are facing, how will you remove them. So this was prepared by me in consultation with CII, because that's the industry body. And again, not CII, because CII can do it as a academic exercise. We had got hands-on people. So not Anand Mahindra for Mahindra and Mahindra, but Pawan Goenka, because he is the hands-on man who is dealing with automobile sector. And incidentally, automobile is the largest component of India's manufacturing sector, largest.
Right.
And in fact, it should be under the old series of GDP, 49% of manufacturing used to come only from automobile sector. So that one. And services, which identified 12 champion sectors of services. And said that these are the 12 champion sectors which have the potential to grow. I got 5,000 crore sanction from the cabinet also for that. And then agriculture. Many measures are required, and Prime Minister Modi has taken a number of measures. But one of them will be India's increasing agri exports. The potential for agri export is $100 billion. And when I say agri export, means agriculture, horticulture, dairy, marine products, and meat, all put together. You know, when you are talking about, I mean, just saying this interestingly, Gauri, that when you are going to increase your agriculture export, your foreign buyers are not going to buy your agriculture products unless they're quality products. So you are actually, by exporting agriculture products, you are integrating quality into your domestic food production and the entire food chain.
Exactly.
So
but I have to
like,
ask you a question, sir. I have to ask you what happened to that plan? What happened to the $5 trillion?
Actually, it was made almost 3 years. So I got it processed when I was a minister, and these were the final days of the Modi 1 government. And I don't know what is the present status, but this is complete roadmap is ready. And this sort of good plan. That's like an example of someone like Dr. Jaishankar, who is now in the government and the foreign minister. So this was all ready. I think it must be under implementation, but there is a roadmap readily available.
Okay, then let me then ask you, there are some specifics around the economic part that I'm going to come back to, because you mentioned about manufacturing, I'm going to come back to, but then because you mentioned Mr. Jaishankar, and, because there are so many global headwinds as far as economics and geopolitical equations coming together, how do you see India's role going forward in terms of the larger sentiment the world has about decoupling? Nobody can wish China away. It's too big a country economically to wish. We don't want it either. But the sentiment to reduce the excessive dependence economically on China, has that translated into India's economic gains? And how do you see that in the future as well?
See, actually, the world has evolved into very interesting economic interdependence. If you look at 4 decades ago, no country was dependent on other country as much as is dependent today. See, today, if you look at it, currently, what a challenge that we are facing, that we are the biggest manufacturer of vaccine, but still we need some ingredients which must be coming from some other part of the world.
True.
So that economic interdependence has become the hallmark of today's world economy. Now, when you talk about decoupling, it means whether this entire ecosystem that has been developed globally should be reinvented or relooked into. That's the question. But in that context, we must have a medium-term and a long-term plan, but also short-term action. Medium-term plan could be that to an extent, the critical part of your own supply chains, you should have a supply chain security, like we talk about energy security. You try to secure your energy resources in a way that no disruption can ever cause it. And that's why you keep strategic reserves. The US now, which is becoming the biggest producer of oil and gas, both becoming, is also having strategic reserves. Then they are not as dependent on them. Thanks to shale gas and shale oil, now US has become from importer to exporter of oil and gas, actually. It has completely changed the dimension. But still they had a strategic reserve. We have strategic reserve. So from that context, I think we should think about a strategic relook into your supply chain. That is very, very important. I'll give an example. No, directly not related to India. There are certain rare earth materials. Now, these rare earth materials are so important for your completely industry related to electronics. And as you know, Gauri, better than anybody else, that some of these electronics now run the world. Like your entire, what you and me are talking, what are you talking on? Through a platform? What is it? What that platform is running on what? How do you do e-commerce? How do you learn airlines? How do you run banking system of the world?
True.
These are all on the platforms based on some electronic device, hardware or software part. Software is not necessarily rarer, but based on that. Now, I don't want to talk about a countries, therefore, if you permit me, I'll not mention, but one country was threatened by not giving those rare earth, and they thought that he'll crumble. So we have to, from that point of view, Gauri, we have to look into very seriously about strategic evaluation of our supply chains. And this interdependence is good. For example, why you think when we talk about it, we would like to manufacture mobile phones in India. If you want to manufacture mobile phones, you cannot manufacture from A to Z in India.
Right.
Some parts will have to be imported.
Yes.
We'll be assembling it finally here, but not necessarily making everything here, which is not even desirable and not necessarily will then, in fact, the end manufacturer under whose brand the mobile phone is being sold, we may not also like that everything should be done in one particular place, not necessarily for a strategic reason, but also because of economic reason. So I'm saying put all together, what you're asking me, decoupling is a very important issue. But you have to be seen in that context. Now, I feel that China wish to import a lot. In fact, I will tell you something, Gauri, again. Permit me to say this, of course, that when I was a commerce minister, that was the first year that we reduced the trade deficit for the first time. It was always rising only in one direction for the last 30 years. I got it reduced. I had called China's commerce minister here, worked with him, prepared a strategy, including promoting, you can reduce trade deficit by two ways, by reducing import or by increasing exports.
True.
I worked on both. And export increase, we also talked about some of the pharmaceuticals. And the Chinese had said something like, I will not call it necessarily in that way, but non-tariff barrier, because if you don't give, pharmaceutical is a very regulated market. So I said, you must work with our companies and allow them to work with the regulatory compliance because they are so good. They are US FDA approved, they are European FDA approved, they are approved by Japanese FDA. So what should be regulatory issues? So there is nothing related to health. I have not asked you to compromise your health by helping them on regulation, but must help them. So I worked on this. So decoupling part, you are asking very, very important question, is something which has to happen for sure, but must have a medium-term plan for it and a long-term perspective in it. And also must look at it from this angle, that when you are inviting foreign companies to invest in India, we must take them on board fully because they would be investing in India for end product, maybe for domestic market, as well as using India's other strength, like cheap labor with good access of manpower, etc., for exporting it to other countries. So their export markets will also depend upon how they benefit from India's presence in India.
True.
So we'll have to take them on board and then we can work on this strategy.
Do you think apart from, so mobile manufacturing has definitely been a big star, so to say, an outperformer, so to say, in the overall Indian manufacturing scenario so far. In your assessment, what could be or which sector could be that next breakthrough for India? We need to identify our core areas of competence. In your assessment, what could those be after mobile manufacturing?
It's a very good question. Excellent question. In fact, I had prepared a new industrial policy. This was the only third time we are going to prepare it. First was in 1956, as you know, that was industrial resolution, not a policy really. And then 1991, Manmohan Singh, in fact, that time the trade minister, industry minister was Manmohan Narsingh Rao. As a prime minister, he had kept that portfolio with him.
Yes.
The third policy. We had identified some of these key segments of new industries. If you look at it, we have a twin challenge. We have the fifth largest economy even today. So we are not a small economy that way. And therefore, when we have fifth largest economy, we have already created some industry. We are the sixth or seventh largest industrialized economy of the world also. The industry-wise, we are in that number. So we have a large industry. It's not as large as some other countries, but still fairly large. So first challenge is that we cannot make it redundant. So we have to modernize them. Otherwise, what happens to all the investment that has gone into it, the employment that has gone into it? So first part should be modernizing this part of it. So this is also an important component of a new thrust areas. Second part would be investing into the new emerging industries. One of them, and this is what I had said when there was no COVID at all on the horizon, life sciences. Not pharmaceutical. I'm talking about a broader science of life sciences. In life science will be one of the critical industries which will grow at faster rate. Again, when you talk about life science is one science, but it's a convergence of several other important technological frontiers, whether it is information technology, whether it is blockchain, all the new areas that are coming. When you talk about blockchain, when you do clinical research, for life sciences, ultimately you have to do clinical research, clinical trials. So when you are doing clinical trials, blockchain can come very handy to you. When you talk about artificial intelligence, this can be used and applied. See, when you talk about artificial intelligence, it's a very broad science, a broad technology, not science really. But applied part of it, if you look at it, there are so many segments that can benefit in India, particularly agriculture. You can work on it in a very significant way, like watering of plants. You cannot use artificial intelligence to devise a program in which exactly at the right time, that type of water that can be dispensed with, that type of things. So you are asking which industries, the life sciences and these 5 technologies which you call as emerging technologies, whether they're blockchain or machine learning or artificial intelligence or big data, all of that put together can be actually put into Internet of Things, wherein actually you connect everything internet together. All of this applied part of that. See, we cannot claim to be the originator of this technology anyway. So while we have to work on that and we can say, I will develop new R&D and develop new patents and everything. Even today, it is very, we got to work on that, is that we don't file too many patents in the world. We are not even in the top 5 of filing technology patents, though we are the 5th largest economy. So there has to be a convergence between R&D and size of economy. If you are the 5th largest, why should you not be in the top 5 of filing the patents and R&D new ideas? So I think that is going to take some time. So while it takes time, the question that you're asking me, in the new technology front,
no matter how much we vilify the Chinese economic model, one needs to sort of also put that out in perspective that it was in 2010 that their 5-year plan said that technology will be the next frontier that we need to conquer. So 11 years later, we are sort of still talking about it. And it's important to sort of understand that how the Chinese realized this more than a decade ago. But then, let me then ask you this, as we talk about, Mr. Prabhu, that, COVID has wreaked havoc with the Indian economy like it has with the rest of the world. But this was also a year that we were supposed to sort of get back on track, after last year's horrible economic devastation that happened because of COVID. We were expected to sort of get back on track this year. ADB had announced, and a lot of others had announced double-digit growth expectations. In your assessment, are those still on track? And more importantly, what do you think can be done to try and reduce or cushion the economic pain that lies ahead after the second wave?
I think pre-second wave, one of the thrust areas rightly actually put it on table by Prime Minister was infrastructure investment, and which I fully agree. In fact, infrastructure has a potential to create many more jobs while it is being built. And because you create infrastructure and therefore bridge the infrastructure deficit that we are suffering from for a very long time, then obviously that will become a launching pad for a new enterprise. And therefore, I was talking about even competitiveness earlier. So one of the competitive advantage we'll have over a period of time is if you have good infrastructure. So investing into infrastructure is one thing that has to be done very, very quickly to revive India's economy as well as create medium-term plan for India's increasing share in the global market. So that is one for sure. The second part is that, India's economy, like all the economies of the world, including US and even Germany, or for that matter, all major economies of the world, the small and medium enterprise play a key role. Now, what is the definition of small and medium enterprise in India will differ from US or it will differ in Germany. But still, they are a very important component of their economies. So making SMEs stronger, more efficient is very important. Now, you talked about the pain. I think they are the ones who have suffered maximum pain. And I think that's why we will need to work on it. Gauri, I remember something very interesting. In 2008, when we came out with a idea, because particularly the US and the Europeans said, and they're talking in context of Lehman Brothers and others, that they're too big to fail. We talked about that. That's why the government has to rescue them. I had said at that time, those are too big to fail, but a small and medium enterprise is too small to survive. So when they are too big to fail, you try to rescue them. What about the too small to survive element of India's economy? You must support them. That's why we have to actually support the small and medium enterprise in a very significant way. Because they are a very important component. And again, if you look at it, again, why I'm saying this, if you look at the employment profile of the country as well as the world actually, because we are on the threshold of the fourth industrial revolution, the economic model of the world is changing. Therefore, the employment profile will also change. So in that context, if you protect small and medium enterprises, you are actually creating a safety net for some sections of society. Because otherwise, if the SMEs are not there, then those many people will be seekers of jobs. So today they are creators of jobs, but they will become seekers of jobs. So I think we have to make in the second wave, we have to still evaluate the impact, how it has impacted the economy. Because the first wave, it was very clear because there was a lockdown, etc. So we knew the economic output had contracted significantly. In this particular wave, because it's localized, and Maharashtra is, of course, the biggest contributor to India's GDP.
Yes.
So I don't know how far impact that will have, how long that will last. So we'll have to evaluate it. And then based on that evaluation, we'll have to actually provide support to the affected sectors as well as affected sections of society.
True, true. In fact, I just want to quickly say that there's this very interesting study that McKinsey did last year about Indian manufacturing, which said that while in the US, on average, firms grow 10 times their size in a 35-year time period, in India, firms grow just twice their size in 35 years. So that explains the whole dwarf concept that exists in Indian manufacturing, that, we don't know what to do with them because they're still not big enough to compete and they're still not so small that we sort of, need to handhold them. And I think that's really the crux of the Indian manufacturing or the larger problem as far as Indian industry is concerned. But having said that, sir, I want to ask you this as we sort of, come to the end of this conversation, that Mr. Prabhu, as we, end this, in your hope and assessment, what would be that one big milestone that you would wish that the government achieves next year when we have this conversation, when the government is completing another year into its second term, that one big aspiration that you would want to be fulfilled this year?
See, I think when you're facing a challenge of this magnitude, which is once in a, probably not only one's lifetime, but few generations' lifetime problem that you're facing at one go, I think one good part of that is that Prime Minister Modi has shown tremendous leadership. He has actually taken this challenge and faced it squarely. So he is changing it head on, though it's not an easy job to do. but still he's doing a fabulous work in terms of facing this challenge, working with people, addressing the challenge together. So in my opinion, that's a great contribution of this leadership of Prime Minister Modi during these very troubled times. And I'm sure we can see it as we go along, we'll be able to see it. He's also working on a very important program, which is not probably well appreciated by the people, is providing good quality drinking water to every household of India, to the pipe water. This is something great contribution, in my opinion. It was started during this second Narendra Modi government, that he's providing Ghar Ghar Jal. That is how I think the title of the program is. It is a very important program because I had in Atalji's cabinet, I had 6 different responsibilities. One of them was water, and therefore I dealt with this very hands-on basis. So I know how important this program is. So this again is a big program that you will see being completed in another 2-3 years' time. And then you will see a great thing, because water, if you give good quality water, you are actually addressing public health issues. Because 2/3 of the diseases in India, of course, I am not talking about pandemic, minus the pandemic, 2/3 of the diseases of India are waterborne. And 1/3 of the fatalities happen because of waterborne diseases. So if you are dealing with water, you are helping that. Secondly, in rural areas, a girl cannot go to school because she has to go and fetch the water. A woman of the house has to probably walk some few miles to get the water, so she cannot work in the field. So if you address the water problem and give a good quality drinking water to every household, we'll see higher enrollment of girls for schooling. We'll see better women into the employment, therefore their family incomes will rise. So it has a huge spin-off benefits. So I think this is a great contribution of Narendra Modi, and that is his personal idea, which is a flagship program that he has launched. So I think this again is a big contribution of Narendra Modi in these last 2 years' time.
All right, Mr. Prabhu, thank you. Thank you so much for speaking to India Foundation. I hope that the storm that is upon us quickly passes by. India gets vaccinated soon. And next year, when we have this conversation, we are talking about a high growth trajectory and meeting all those big achievements that right now look a little difficult because of the present scenario that we are living in, hopefully, which will be short term. Thank you so much for speaking to us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much
for this opportunity
to this conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to this edition of the India Foundation podcast. Do like, share, and subscribe the India Foundation channel.